Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no copay. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit. And always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Oh my goodness, September is upon us. Kids, sorry, you're going to have to go back to school pretty soon if you haven't already. And hopefully some of these great episodes will help keep you going, keep you motivated. But, we have the holidays coming up around the corner. They're going to be here before we think about it. So again, I want to thank my sponsors, Keto Mojo, keto-mojo.com. Great website, great people. They're doing great work in the community. They're doing a ton with education. So if you're looking for a ketone monitor or glucose monitor, they're a great resource. And check out their website. It's amazing. They have so much information, so much good stuff for us to all learn from. Also, of course, health code, gethealth.com, GETHLTH.com. Discount code MetHealth through this podcast and for metabolic health. They still have great chocolate and vanilla shakes and vegetarian offerings for those so inclined. But they're doing great work, and they also have a new berberine that a lot of people are raving about that has turmeric in it. So it's right up, what we're looking for our patients for improving metabolic health. So again, thank you for your sponsorship and for bringing these episodes, and thank you for listening. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. I love doing this podcast. It's so much fun for me. I've got great sponsors, great listeners. I mean, I run into people all the time. They're like super supportive and kind and like that we get to talk about the behind the scenes stuff. And so I have a guy that's like, he's been a friend. He's helped us with Low Carb MD behind the scenes. He's done so much for me with helping me to get Arizona Metabolic Health up and running and San Diego Metabolic Health up and running. And this podcast, he was the guy I brainstormed with. I said, okay, here's what I want to do. Do you think it will fly? What do you think? What do we do? What's our path forward? He introduced me to Simply Snacking, who actually got us up and running. And then they had a change of ownership and plans and all that kind of stuff. And so Chris Cornell, welcome, man. So great to have you. Your story is amazing. And, just knowing you on a human level it's really an honor to have you on.
Well, it's an honor to be asked back. I've always enjoyed talking with you, sitting in the back of symposium conferences, eating low-carb snacks in between presentations. And I've really enjoyed our friendship over the last, it's been about 4 years or more.
I know it's been wild, man. It's been wild. And all you've done and all you're doing and with marketing and getting out there. But more importantly, tell people your story, like kind of how you got into this realm, how you got interested in nutrition, lifestyle, stress management, all that kind of stuff. Because I don't think a lot of people online may know that.
Well, sure. Yeah, I've told the story before, but it's back in about 9 years ago when I was 51. So I just turned 60 2 months ago. At 51, I weighed 278 pounds. And I learned that when I stepped on the scale at my mother's house. And I was startled, to say the least. I had not realized I had let myself go quite that bad, but I realized I had to do something about it. And that was the beginning of sort of doubling down and trying to lose weight through the same ways that I had always tried before, and that was calorie restriction and various diets. I did plant-based diets. I did all sorts of wacky things. And you know, I had lost as much as 55 pounds on one occasion through calorie restriction, exclusive calorie restriction, without really knowing what I was doing with respect to what macros I was eating. And anyway, fast forward to the beginning of the year 2018. I had gotten some of the weight off once again by following more of a plant-based guy, Joel Furman. And I was restricting calories and I was eating a lot of plants. And I realized that the signs of losing control were coming back. I I started feeling weak. I started feeling like I wasn't going to be able to continue. And I started to get kind of despondent about the fact that I was going to fail again. And so I reached out to a doctor friend via Twitter, and I asked him if he would recommend a book. And I told him that I wanted to sustainably lose weight. And he responded with a direct message that was very thoughtful. And he told me that he thought I would do well with Gary Taubes's Why We Get Fat. And that was my real introduction to low carb eating. And I read the book, and I've told this many times before, but I was actually, I must have gotten the book like around January 12th or something. And on my daughter's 16th birthday, we were in the waiting room of a Mexican restaurant, and I was reading the book on my Kindle. And I got to a part, it was a long wait, and I got to this part where things started to make sense. And I was like, something just, a light went on, and I was like, this is going to work. It makes sense, but I still had my little trepidation because everything I'd ever tried before had failed. And that was my first meal at a Mexican restaurant, no less, that was low carb. And I never looked back. I didn't need any tortillas. I didn't need any chips. I just had chicken and cheese, and it was a good meal. It did what it needed to do. And I'd say about 2 weeks later, as I was reflecting on whether this was going to work or not, I started feeling really optimistic, and I was losing a little bit of weight, but I also was noticing that I wasn't hungry as I was eating rather large quantities of very low carbohydrate foods, a lot of protein, and plenty of healthy fats. And I proceeded to lose 5 or 6 pounds a month straight on through until I had gotten down to my goal weight of about 205 pounds. Um, and then I went beyond that, and I ended up losing 80 pounds of fat. And right now, it's been more than 6 years that I've been maintaining that weight loss. Now, I have actually gained some weight back, but it's kind of a good weight because after I got myself down to a reasonable weight, I started doing a lot more exercise, and some recomposition allowed me to build up a decent amount of muscle in my late 50s and now early 60s.
Yeah, I
So
know
that's,
you've self-experimented, you've done so much, and along the way you had a little bump in the road with chemotherapy and all that kind of stuff. So what happened with that?
well, yeah, that was interesting to say the least, and very scary. I was just getting down to my goal weight, and it was the end of August of 2018. I had a doctor's appointment that I had made because I had noticed a lump in my neck, and I stupidly wasn't in a real rush to get that checked out. Um, I thought it was a swollen gland, and I went in, and I thought that I actually went into the doctor's appointment thinking that I was going to be lauded for my weight loss. And the doctor saw my neck, and she barely even mentioned my weight. And things kind of went a little crazy from there. I was in for scans and stuff, and I was officially diagnosed with cancer in my head and neck in I guess early October, and I went through chemo and radiation. in late 2018 and early 2019. I do think that my health improvements and my improved way of eating was very beneficial in terms of getting through the cancer. Um, uh, and it was quite an experience, but the cancer also did something to me. I'd already kind of reflected on my mortality even before the cancer. Um, when you weigh 278 pounds and you feel like you're unhealthy and tired and lethargic, you start thinking about, what are the next 20, 30 years, if you're fortunate enough to last that long, what are they going to be like? What's it going to be like when the family goes out for a hike and, maybe you can't go because you're in such bad shape? And then with the cancer, initially, we got some really, really concerning news. My wife and I were sitting in one doctor's appointment, and the doctor basically saw a whole bunch of stuff on the scan of the chest um, that was lighting up in a way that was he was pretty sure that it was cancer that had metastasized to the chest, and um, he was grim to say the least. I mean, when my wife and I left that appointment, I don't think either one of us said anything for probably 3 or 4 minutes after we left. We walked to the car, we got in the car, and there was just no words. I was convinced that it was coming to an end, and that kind of changed my outlook on everything. Things that I used to take for granted, I no longer took for granted, and that probably had a lot of effect on what happened later with respect to my attitude towards health, fitness, quality of life. Because when you start to appreciate those things more, you pay more attention and you realize there are things that you can influence. And I made a lot of promises to myself before I knew I was going to get through the treatments. And I actually was. I've now been 5 years since I got out of treatment, and they've I guess officially declared me, quote, cancer free. I know that there's still, like, anybody that goes through those treatments has risks of things recurring or whatever. But at this point, like, I feel like every day is a gift, um, and anything I can do to invest in making the remaining years, and hopefully there'll be a lot of them, as good as possible, is something I'm willing to do.
I'll tell you, you caught my attention during that time because I thought I saw you with IVs and going through your treatments and going through stuff, getting weak, losing muscle mass like crazy. And you're like, okay, I'm coming back. I'm gonna start doing like little bar dips and pull-ups. And I was like, man, this guy's amazing. Before even knowing you, I'm like, I like this guy because you're sharing it when you're at your pit, you're at the bottom and you're sharing with your journey like all along, and so it's hard to do that when you're dealing with mortality. You don't know what's going to happen, how much treatment you're going through, but you weren't just going to fold up the tent and give up. I could tell that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I should mention, and I know this is a big thing with you and the things that, and I just listened to your great presentation at I did it virtually, but the Symposium for Metabolic Health in San Diego. This year was the first one in a long time that I haven't been able to get to in person. But you talk about a lot of factors, including hope, and you also talk about support. I got through the things that I had to get through with a lot of help and a lot of support from my family, from friends, from people that I knew initially from Twitter. I'd get phone calls and direct messages from people that I was friends with, but also people that I barely knew. And the exposure that I've gotten on Twitter at this point, I have a lot of followers, and I get a lot of traction when I post things. But when I first started out, I can still remember when I had 19 followers, and if I posted something, nobody would even see it. Um, and that's pretty much the way everyone starts out. And I've gotten so much from connections that I've made. I guess now it's called X, but it's like I've gotten to talk to people who have done amazing things. I mean, so many people I've had one-on-one conversations with and have learned so much from. and I've also learned how to take things from somebody, even if you disagree with them on even important issues, because no two people agree on everything. And sometimes people that are great friends disagree intensely on certain issues, but you can still get great benefit from a friendship or from just a civil exchange with people. Like, there's people that can run 100 miles at a really fast pace, and they might not be the person that you would go to for weightlifting advice, but they could certainly provide you with beneficial stuff for running. And over the last 6 years, I'm not a great runner, but I've completed a marathon at age 59, 58. Um, I'm planning on doing more. I've got a half marathon coming up in a little while. And at age 60, I can bench press 300 pounds and do things that I couldn't do when I was 51. Um,
And doing
and
bar these dips with a bunch of weight hanging from you and all that stuff. I mean, you're doing some amazing stuff. And plus, not only that, I see you out with your running with your daughter, running with your wife. You guys are out enjoying the countryside together and spending that time together and accomplishing things together and being healthy together. It's so huge. Like a lot of people, when they turn 60, go, I'm done. I'm never going to exercise. I'm just going to watch TV all day, you know?
I was just talking with someone today on Twitter about the fact that when I got out of cancer treatments, I was beat. I was totally fatigued, and I could barely get up off the couch those first couple of weeks. And one day, my wife, I think she kind of sensed that I needed something, and she said, "What if we go out for a run?" Because we had gone running, we'd done some running prior to my cancer diagnosis, and I had enjoyed it, and we had definitely seen some benefits to our cardiovascular conditioning. And my first thought when she asked that was like, nah, I'm too tired. And I literally thought about, it just occurred to me like how a few months earlier, 6 months earlier, I would have given anything to have the opportunity to get off that couch and go running with my wife. And here I am about to say no, thank you. And I said, damn, I'm never, I said to myself, I am never going to turn down an opportunity to go running with my wife as long as I live, unless I'm physically not available because I'm at an appointment or something. I'm not going to like choose to sit on the couch while my wife goes for a run if she invites me. And I pretty much kept that promise. I mean, we've gone running together hundreds of times. We trained for the Los Angeles Marathon, which would have been ridiculous. At age 51, the thought of me running a mile was absurd. And to run 26 miles side by side with my wife, and we had a blast. And we finished with my daughter and my daughter-in-law were watching and screaming for us to finish. And my son finished about an hour ahead of us. It was a first marathon for all three of us, and it was a blast. Right now, yeah, we're training together. My wife, my daughter, and I. We don't get all of our workouts in sync, but we do run together probably at least two times a week, maybe three. And we're running a half marathon on September 15th. So that's yeah, it's great to be able to double up and get family time and physical fitness at the same time. And I guarantee just about anybody could accomplish so much more than they can imagine. Not everybody can run a marathon. Not everybody can do all sorts of different things. But if your goal is to do better than you're doing now, there's a lot that can be accomplished just by sensible um, sensible things, and you can make it fun. And sometimes we do it the wrong way for years and years without realizing it, and it doesn't feel good. Like running, I used to run too fast without realizing it. I used to make my runs miserable,
Mm.
and I hated running. And it took a lot of smart people very patiently giving me advice for a long time before I realized that I had to, in order to enjoy it the way I really needed to, slow down a bit and enjoy the run. Don't make it a miserable experience. And I have that kind of outlook. Yeah, it's the same actually with food choices. I mean, that's why calorie restriction is a utterly miserable thing, at least for me, and a well-formulated low-carb diet with high protein and healthy fats is a very enjoyable experience that is completely different and doesn't require any great amount of willpower. In fact, very little, in my opinion. It requires some discipline. But anyway, that's those are just some thoughts that go through my head.
Yeah, no, and I think it's amazing. One of the things I just wanted to touch upon that you were saying earlier that I really liked about you too, and I still do, is that you would reach out to people who may not agree with you on nutrition. Like Brady Homer comes to mind, right? He's a runner, and you go, show me how you run, right? And you guys could connect on that level. You don't have to agree on keto, not keto, high carb, low carb, whatever. So I think so many people get so into their belief, whether it's their religion, they're afraid to talk to us like, on this podcast. I wanted to open up, some of my favorite guests were atheists, right? And we could talk about why do you believe that? Why do you not believe this? And we don't have to like convince each other, argue with each other, but we agree on the important stuff, like taking care of our families, being a good husband, whatever it might be. But I've seen that you've reached across the aisle to people and have a reasonable discussion. You can have friendships with people who may not agree with you on everything. I don't have friends who agree with me on everything.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Brady Homer and Zach Bitter. Zach is a former world record holder for the 100-mile and the 12-hour run. And I'll just mention again, because I went on his podcast and I actually wrote a long article about both Zach and Brady. Zach ran 100 miles at a
It's
6:48
ridiculous, man. It's
six
unbelievable.
6:48 mile pace. I mean, that is
It's insane.
insane.
It's
I,
insane. It's
at
insane. Someone just tried to do that for 1 mile. That's why I tease him. I'm like, I can't even do it for a mile. You do it for 100. He's like, well, I'm not really an athlete. I'm just like consistent. It's like, you're an
and
athlete, dude.
and Zach and Brady come to mind as people who, Zach gets some heat for his views on, say, seed oils. Um, you know, I try not to get too far into the details. I believe in, I'm not a scientist and I'm not a researcher and I'm learning a lot. I've read a ton. I've watched a bunch of presentations, but I'm still not, I don't always know how the real scientific aspects of this stuff work under the hood, but I can see my results. Um, I sense that seed oils aren't real good for me, and I've tried to cut them out of my diet as best as possible. But for me to compare what's best for me with somebody who can run 100 miles at a 6:47 pace, it's obvious to me that there could be some differences in the way our respective bodies handle certain things in certain quantities. And I know you've alluded many times to, like, Sean Baker, for example. He can probably eat more carbs than a person who's, overweight because he's got so much muscle mass. And, so it's like you've got to figure out what works best for you in the context of how you live your life and the things that you do. And I've kind of made learning through trial and error, one of the things that it's hard because you got competing experts that have, very strong feelings on a whole bunch of different individual issues, but you've got to figure out what works best for you in combination without, hopefully taking too many risks. And so when it's a low risk thing, I'm willing to experiment. And so I've experimented a lot with my eating, with my physical fitness. I used to not run, for example. I literally did not run very, very much because I was afraid that it would sap into my weightlifting gains. I had heard that before, and I'm starting to feel like maybe that's an excuse that some weightlifters have because they don't like to run. Um, now I realize if you're competing in a high level, powerlifting or whatever, perhaps the amount of demand that is required, it would be possible that you would chip away a little bit of your results if you ran too much. But for somebody like me, it's totally not a problem. I did not lose any strength during my marathon training, um, and also, it's also notable that I didn't lose any weight during my marathon training. I was running as much as 40 miles a week, and I did not lose any weight. So for those who think that running is necessarily a great way to lose weight, um, it's definitely not a guarantee.
And during that time, I'm curious, did you liberalize your caloric intake, or you never really pay attention to it necessarily, right? Do you think you were, what I'm getting at, do you think you were eating more during that running time because your body was demanding more fuel?
Yeah, I definitely, one thing that I've done is I've changed my views completely on calories over, I mean, right away when I started low carb, my views on calories shifted dramatically. I understood that calories were not the thing to focus on. And your question though, I definitely eat more when I'm at very high activity levels. I can sense that that's the way it happens, and I sometimes eat more carbs. Um, if you run last Friday night, I ran 10 miles. It was hot, it was humid. I lost a ton of water weight. Um, I was craving some carbs, and I also knew, um, nothing bad was going to happen to me if I ate some chicken parmesan. I did not start eating Oreos or Doritos, but a piece of a good slab of delicious parmesan. Yes, I ate more carbs than I normally do. Um, Honestly, probably wasn't a whole lot more, but like
Yeah,
it's
it sounds like you're in tune to your body and you listen and your body's telling you, okay, time to have it. Not because you're stressed, tense, angry with someone. You're eating because your body says, look, I need more fuel. And so I think that's, and Zach Bitter changes his fuel depending. He goes, I may look keto one day, carnivore one day. I may look like a carb loader one day because of what I'm training, what my body needs. And obviously, the other thing that's really wrong about Zach is he finished the 100-mile race and they go, oh, if you keep running, they didn't tell him to the last mile. And they go, if you keep running, you break the 12 hours straight running. Oh, okay. Could you imagine, like, you just ran 100, you think you're done, your brain thinks you're done, then you go, okay, let's kick it. Like, that is a different mentality. Like, most of us, once we hit a certain point, we're like, I'm done, I'm not doing anything else, right? I'll break the record next time I go out. But that mindset, and the other thing that's amazing about him that struck me when I interviewed him was that I said, "Are you just zen when you run? Do you just go into it? Your brain goes into a different place?" And he says, "No, I'm concentrating the whole time, thinking my split. What's this? What's that?" And it's like a mental torture while you're running. It's not like you just go into like some, zombie land and just keep go on autopilot. Like it's amazing what you guys do when you run those 26 miles. The mental part of it.
one further note with Zach is, he set that world record running on an indoor track. Talk about like it would drive me out of my mind to run around a track. I don't know what the length. I'm assuming it was probably around a quarter mile, but it might have been even shorter than that. I mean, he ran around that track so many times over those 12 hours. Um,
Worse than that, man. I'll tell you what makes him even crazier, right? Out of respect. He ran 100 miles on a treadmill. That is mind numbing to be able to run on a treadmill with, like, I don't even know if he listens to music or anything. He just runs. He just runs 100 miles on the treadmills. Like, that is like, I'm like looking going, how much time do I got left? I'm almost done. When am I going to be done with this thing, right? But it's amazing that like his mindset and what he does. And he even says like, yeah, it's probably not good for me to run like this, but it's too much, but I want to see what I can do. And like, I love people like that. Go, you look, I'm just gonna put it all out there and do what I can.
I don't know how these ultra distance runners do it, honestly. When my wife and I trained for the marathon, we started training in November for a March marathon, and it was really good for us because it was the first winter that we had ever really kept our running going right through. Winter is almost always a time when it gets dark so early and it's cold, and sometimes there's snow on the ground. And I just we were running through the winter, and oh, now I lost my train of thought. I can't even remember where I was going with this, but and then, oh yeah, the amount of time it takes just to get ready for a marathon is substantial enough that I don't see myself doing too many of them, and I really don't understand how these ultra guys do the 50, 75, 100-mile runs, because the amount of time is it's just crazy. But I give them my full respect. Um,
Yeah, and
so
also, hey, and I'm curious too. In your training, do you do sprint work in your training too? Because I'm curious about these different muscle twitch fibers and all that kind of fun stuff. We've talked about over the years zone two training, high intensity interval training, high intensity weightlifting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I do some sprinting. Um, I haven't been as dedicated to it as I probably should. I think that there's probably more benefits that I could derive from doing it more regularly. And sometimes I slack on my um, deadlifts and squats, especially when I'm actually doing mileage in the running training for a race. Um, but I am a big believer in all that stuff. The sprinting I know is especially from talking to like Dr. Ben and others about the benefits of sprinting. I am not gifted with very much fast twitch muscles. I have a lot more of the slow twitch endurance muscles. Um, but even people without the gift can improve just by training. So yeah, it is something that I believe in, and it's something that I do probably not quite as often as I should.
So tell me your experiment that you did with our friends from Health Code who happened to be a sponsor of the podcast. What you just did an experiment like trying out different things. And so tell me about that. Tell people about that who are interested in hearing that.
Sure. Well, I've heard Joel, and I've also heard Joel Bickman. He's the owner
Brother
of
of Ben.
yeah, the brother of Ben. I've heard both. I've listened to Ben Bickman with great interest on many occasions at symposiums, and I've also had the opportunity to interview Ben for an article that I wrote. Um, he's really a leader in the field, and PhD researcher, and he knows a lot about insulin and insulin resistance and um, fat and fat loss and all the
Life.
science.
Life.
Yep. Yeah.
He
He's
knows
a
a lot
he,
about life too. He's got a lot of wisdom.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed talking to him. And then I heard you interview his brother Joel, who, Ben, I guess, developed the formula that went into Health Code, which are meal replacements with high protein, healthy fat, and relatively low carb with some fiber. And incidentally, they are extremely delicious. And they come in chocolate macadamia and vanilla. Um, but I had the opportunity to talk to Joel, and Joel is just, he's a fascinating guy to talk to as well. And you tapped into a lot of it in your conversations with him on the podcast. And I had some questions for him. And I guess what started this was one day I made a tweet or a post, as they call it now on X, and it was about me trying out some protein powder mixed with water at 10:30 in the morning after having gone 5+ years doing a more tightly um, intermittent fasting where I would fast until afternoon, usually until like 1 o'clock. So previously, I was doing like a 17-7 um, fast, with 17 hours not eating and a 7-hour window. And I would typically eat 2 meals. And I got some criticism from the weightlifting community about concentrating my protein too much in just 2 meals, and that I would definitely do better if I spread it out. And I was skeptical, and I kind of resisted the idea. But then I did this post where I was doing some protein just to sort of test it out, and a response that I got was from Ben Bickman. He said, "You should consider adding some fat with that, or eating some fat with that meal." And it got me thinking. I knew how smart Ben was, and I knew he wouldn't just post that for no reason. And I realized that he was responsible for Health Code, and I went and looked at the ingredients again, and I saw
And
that
he actually just so people know, he has no financial interest in Health Code. He sold out to his brother Joel, who took over. But obviously Ben knows the benefits. So
yes.
so anyways,
So he's suggesting to me that I should consider eating some fat with it, and I I tried. I for decades, I had been indoctrinated into the idea that fat was bad for you. By the time I found low carb, I definitely loosened up my views on fat to the point where I was not avoiding the fats that were present in beef and seafood and eggs, but I was still very resistant to add more fat. Um, I still was eating very little in the way of butter or extra virgin olive oil. And I wasn't adding fat to things by design because I was eating non-fat Greek yogurt. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think I was sort of shortchanging myself on the fat, and I was eating very high amounts of protein, and which can work for a weight loss, weight maintenance uh, result, but it I just think I was sort of squeezing myself too short on the fat intake. And anyway, so after Ben's post, I started looking at the health code, and I was like, wow, maybe I should learn a little bit more about the health code. And I called Joel, or I emailed him, and he invited me to get on the phone with him, and he started explaining some things. And so during our conversation, I decided that I was going to give health code a try, and see what would happen if I added a health code meal replacement at 10:30 every day for 3 months. And so that was a fairly significant change in
And you
my.
were that in addition to 2 extra meals?
What I did, since I don't restrict calories, I literally added, and I added a double serving of health code, which amounts to 800 calories
A double
added.
serving meaning 4 scoops of health code?
Correct.
Okay.
I would throw it in a blender with ice cubes and either seltzer, unsweetened, just carbonated water, or coffee. And I would blend it up in the blender, and I would have a double serving, which is 800 calories, 54 grams of protein, 54 grams of fat, and I think it's 8 grams of fiber. I mean, sorry, 8 grams of carbs, and a decent amount of that is from fiber. So I started consuming that. Number one, I really liked it. It's a delicious break. I start working pretty early in the morning. 10:30 comes around, and I would have the health code. It was delicious. One thing that's a benefit is, like, while it's like as good as any milkshake, it doesn't have the negatives. It doesn't spike your sugar the way a milkshake would. It doesn't lead to cravings, um, and hunger. And I started realizing, after maybe a week or so, I started realizing that I was eating less at night without trying to eat less. I I was wondering if I would gain weight by technically adding a meal, and all it did was improve my satiety so much that my body composition actually started improving, and I also started noticing that I had more energy. Um, and and another thing is, there were some days I was dedicated to this experiment, of doing it every day. There were some days where I would it would get to be 11:45, and I'd realize that I had worked right through my health code um, time appointment, and I had to start setting an alarm sometimes just to remind myself, because my satiety, like day after day, is just so good that I I like sometimes I eat because I know I should have the fuel and the protein, and that it fuels the activities that I'm doing. I've run a lot, I'm lifting weights a lot. Um, and it's like it did not add it did not cause me to gain weight, is the bottom line. It
Even
actually.
with adding 800 extra calories a day.
Yeah, I mean, technically, if I counted calories, I'd probably find that I may not have added anything,
Because
but
you took off on the back end of it, right? You wouldn't eat as much in the evening or later in the day. You wouldn't be as hungry still,
yeah,
despite your increased activity, your consistent activity level. All right, interesting.
yeah, and I'll tell you what. I will say that I hadn't intended to increase my activity the way I did. But during this what is now, I'll tell you the sort of to ruin the punchline. I got to the end of the 3 months and I didn't stop. Now we're up into the 120-day mark, and so we're just about another full month into it, and I'm not planning on stopping. I've had 100 consecutive days of health code, and now counting. But I started having more energy, and I think that the overall composition, if you look at the nutrients on the label, the overall composition of my food has probably improved as a result of adding the health code, because, you know, especially what's around my house, the meals can get a little repetitive. I try to be creative. You got ground beef and seafood, and you can make a bunch of different things with ground beef. You got your hamburgers, and we do turkey burgers, and we do some steak, usually
Yeah, and taco
cheesesteak.
flavorings or whatever,
Yeah,
do
we have
different things, salsa
tacos.
on there, whatever. Yeah.
We have a chili that we make a lot. That's everything that we make. We double or triple the protein. So we enjoy like things like the beans and chili and the tomatoes and the vegetables. But man, there's a lot of meat packed into the stuff that we have. Um,
Yeah, and that will change how you absorb the carbohydrates too at a slower rate, and you get less of an insulin response and all that. So that makes sense.
but during the process of this, I've increased my walking. Um, my wife and I started walking back in I guess the end of May, and I just went back on my Garmin watch and made a graph of my steps from January through now, and they've gone up from about 4,800 per day to over 10,500 per day. And that is absolutely effortless because I've got energy, and we've managed to find ways to incorporate walking into our life that just haven't been a burden at all. I mean, like, I don't just go off on a treadmill or something like that, or, it's like, so I'm expending more energy for sure, um, and running more, but I feel like even when I'm back from a run, I feel like I have more energy now than I ever had. So I think there's something that's sort of, um, beneficial about choosing to fuel your body um, with an ample amount of energy, ample amount of protein and nutrients that you need, um, rather than trying to make that that you use the calories that you use to modulate your weight. Um, I
So
I'm
going
not
up
a
in your caloric intake allowed you to be more active, is what you're saying. So you naturally just increase your activity. You naturally are, have better mental functioning. You naturally feel better than trying to restrict it to lose weight, right?
Yeah,
And you're like
because
not eating enough, and your brain's like, okay, you're not going to give me energy. Okay, I won't think as well, and I'll make you tired earlier, make you go to sleep earlier. Yeah, there's definitely truth to that, and that's pretty common in the animal kingdom also, right?
yeah, so it's been a good experience, and it's funny. I look at I wrote an article about the health code experiment. I'm more than willing to answer questions from people. I've gotten a lot of questions. I've gotten some criticisms, um, and some people talk about the price, for example. That's too expensive for me. It's not a terribly expensive product when you really do the math and see what you're getting. Um, uh, but I understand, like, everything has a price, and but the one person who responded that he just makes all his own food in his own kitchen, and it's funny because I'm guessing that he didn't fully read the article that I wrote, because when I asked Joel how he responds to that exact question, he um, he said, quote, "If you have the time, knowledge, means, and discipline to plan, purchase, and prepare metabolically perfect meals, you should do that 100% of the time." health code is not for you. You don't need it. And then he followed up by saying the problem is that most people don't have the time to do that 100% of the time.
Or the
And when,
knowledge or the skill set or the time. Yeah, there's so much to that. And that's why I was excited about the project. And the other thing I'm excited about is using it for seniors. Like there's a huge problem with sarcopenia where people don't have muscle mass. We have they're trained to eat like you're giving your mom or dad with dementia milkshakes, like these other terrible
Brian,
products that are on the market, and like give them health code. Like that's worth the dang investment.
Brian, you should see the product that was recommended to me when I was going through my cancer treatments. Um, it was a product that probably had more calories than health code and hardly any protein and a ton of processed carbohydrates. And the whole idea is to, to keep the calories in. And I will grant you that I did have trouble eating food when I was going through chemo and radiation, and I did lose weight and I lost muscle. I lost a lot of fat as well. But I would have loved to have a product like Health Code that tasted as good as it does. I mean, I'll tell you what, I brought the health code. I bring health code everywhere I go. I mean, when I travel, um, I've brought it to symposiums, uh, in San Diego and Boca. I've brought it to the beach. I brought it to Italy. I brought it to Hawaii, and other people that are with me. I whenever when I make a health code, I'm not rude. I don't just sit in the corner and eat it myself. I always offer to other people, and I can't tell you how many times I'm making up, a shake for my wife, my daughter, my nephews. When I was down at the beach just a couple weeks ago, people love it, and they love it every bit as much as a chocolate milkshake. Only it's like 50 times healthier.
Yeah, so people who are demented, like that's great because they're gonna have I mean a milkshake and they're getting the nutritional value and and I'm curious, why did you double the dose of the health code and not just do the standard dose?
Because my target for protein, which I developed
Ah, okay.
early on in the process, is about initially it was 200. I actually just recently cut my target to 190. Um, Not a big difference, but when it was at 200, I think I was oftentimes going even higher than that. Um, I started realizing that if I was going to add some fat to my diet, this is not I don't hold myself to 190, but I do not stress about getting it up over 200 anymore. My body weight, goal weight is about 204. So I'm almost at 1 gram per pound per day. But part of the experiment was to see if dividing up the protein into 3 meals would have benefits on my resistance training. And um, I figured one serving is 27 grams. Just looking at the numbers, that wasn't as big of a shift as I was looking for. I figured if I did 54 grams of protein at 10:30, that would allow me to reduce the amount of protein I needed to take in at lunch and at dinner. And I didn't even get to the good part. You know, I told you I increased my steps, my VO2 max. Now I've been running more, partly because I have more energy. My VO2 max, according to my Garmin, has gone from 40 to 45 during the 3 month experiment. So that's significant. Um, I've also improved drastically on my bench press, on my pull-ups, and on my dips. Um, like this is tangible, documented strength gains over that 3 month period while increasing my running. So I'm 60 years old. So it's you know, even I would not go as far to say as health code caused my VO2 max to go up or health code caused my bench press to go up, but it certainly was an important part of my diet during a time frame when those things are all moving in the right direction and at an age when so many people are insisting that sarcopenia is right around the corner and that the muscle is going to fade away at 10% per decade, blah blah blah. So um, I'm getting stronger and fitter as I'm now approaching my later, I'm well into the decade of my 60s.
Yeah, and you're into a good range. And now, now that's it. Now I would argue, okay, once if you're diabetic or you're, still 60 pounds overweight, it may not be the right. Like, they might be better off going 2 meals a day, cutting the carbs down, watching even watching the caloric intake, even though we're not necessarily talking about calories. Um, or do you think this would apply in their case too?
Well, I think, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that someone that is obese should necessarily be doing a double health code, but I would certainly say that health code would be um, could easily be a very intelligent component of a good plan. Um, and
Especially if what you're saying is it takes the calories off the back end. Because as an example of this, I have a lady, she started at like over 360 or so. We got her down, but she kind of was struggling a little bit. Life stress, things got in the way, all that kind of stuff. So since I started last time, she's lost like 26 pounds. I'm like, what the heck changed since last time? Part of it, her life stress got better. I know that's I've been yapping about that for a couple of years now about how stress affects us. But also, she said, I stopped drinking like my coffee with heavy cream in it like 5 or 6 times a day. I cut back on that because, the caloric intake of that is a lot. And then she said, I stopped eating after 4. Like I eat at 11 and I eat at 4. And that change it made a dramatic drop. I mean, the most weight she's lost since we've been working together. So all these things play a role. So what I'm getting at is if she added in that meal at 11 and she could eat at 4 and she's done for the night, it's going to be way better off than eating something at 8 o'clock before she goes to bed.
yeah, and I think, I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm certainly not a doctor, but you, when you have a lot of fat, which I did, um, in your body, I think it's clear to me that you probably could easily do without eating a lot of fat. As you start getting down to a healthy, what's considered a healthy fat level, now your body does need energy. It needs to come from somewhere, and you don't want it to come from your muscle. Um, and and this is why I get so frustrated with the whole BMI thing. Um, a lot of people don't make distinction between, they talk about weight loss. Um,
Always, all these weight loss studies say weight loss. What's weight loss mean? If you lose half your weight, we're coming up with some of the drugs out there where people are losing weight, but 60%, the 40 to 60% is muscle mass. Anything that's going to lose muscle mass is not a good long-term solution.
no, and the, I've heard practitioners and people with PhD after their name argue with me that, oh, well, BMI works for most people, and I'm like, well, it works for nobody when they're gaining or losing muscle mass in an appreciable amount. It does not account for muscle gain or loss appropriately for anyone. 100% of the people that are sizably losing or gaining muscle are
Yeah.
they're being harmed by a measurement that is supposed to, if BMI is supposed to be a measure of body fat, then it should also, by deduction, be a measure of change in body fat. And it only works when you're not messing around with the muscle.
Well,
And
and they don't understand, and this is something I never really realized, and this is the science of it is if you have a ton of subcutaneous fat, you're metabolically healthier than someone with a ton of visceral fat. The more muscle mass you have, the more it antagonizes visceral fat in particular. So I see people with a bunch of muscle and they have very little visceral fat, like someone like Sean Baker, uh,
Mhm.
right? But other people have a ton of subcutaneous fat, but they have no visceral fat. Like, guess what? Insulin's normal, cholesterol's normal. Like, so it's not about and their BMI. Like, you take people with the same BMI. I have people with an excellent BMI and they're metabolically sick as heck because their visceral fat is where you distribute the fat, basically, right? Some of it's genetic, some of it's lifestyle, some of it's stress, some of it's not sleeping. So it's a huge thing, and you're making a very valid point. I don't think there's an argument against. You cannot look at someone's BMI and say if they're healthy or sick based on BMI. Now, if their BMI is like 80, yeah, probably it's not going to be a bunch of muscle mass in there, right? But if, it could be someone who's super tall. I mean, I see it in my clinic, so I'm glad you bring that point up because that's a huge distinction that most of the experts never address. They just go, oh, they lost weight when they did this. Okay, did they lose muscle mass? If they did, that's not a good like. And I like you said with that like the biggest loser stuff or like people who lose a ton of weight really quickly, they don't maintain that weight loss. So they gain it back, and then they're going through like you talked about earlier with the struggles of losing a bunch of weight, gaining it back. And the more times we do that, the harder it gets because our body goes, I'm not letting you lose fat again like you did last time. I'm going to make it more challenging so you live longer, right? Your body's trying to protect you from yourself.
Yeah, yeah, it's the whole muscle thing. I mean, I never really fully appreciated how important it is, but um, you know, I'm now as I get to into my 60s, I see people. I have friends, some of whom are exactly my age, who are doing amazing things like swimming 2-mile races and doing triathlons and riding bikes 50, 100 miles. And then I've got other friends who are 60 who, I mean, are
Getting ready.
sadly, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Getting ready
almost
for the
all
nursing
over.
home. Yeah.
Yeah, so we and we don't control everything, unfortunately. We are subject to um things that happen to us. We can't control everything, but we certainly can impact a lot, probably a lot more than most people realize.
Yeah. And you're doing some amazing. Say, hey, by the way, what else are you doing behind the scenes? I hear some rumors you're doing some stuff with Dr. Filippo Vedi, the cardiothoracic surgeon.
Yeah, well, I'm very enthusiastic to say that I will be working as a health coach in his um, telemedicine practice in the near future. I'm already an accredited by the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners as a metabolic MHP, metabolic health practitioner. I got that certification accreditation last year, and I'm now going through the Primal Health Coaching Master's Certification course, learning the specifics of how to be a good coach and how to help people um, with that process. And I'm looking forward to that. So I'm going to keep doing the other work that I enjoy so much: interviewing, writing, talking to experts, and things like that. But this will be a way of sort of sharing some of the knowledge that I've gained along the way, and certainly the experience that I've had the benefit of taking part in over the last 6 years.
Awesome. And still doing my newsletter for this podcast.
Yeah, yeah, you're writing a great newsletter, and it's definitely making an impact. I would encourage everybody to sign up for the Life's Best Medicine newsletter. In
How
fact,
do they sign up? I always forget, man. You tell me. I always forget. There's a link at the end of this in the show notes, right?
there will be a link at the end of this in the show notes. There's also, I'll put it in it'll be in the show notes for sure. It'll be in the show notes for every episode, and I believe it's in your. Well, I know you shared it on your Twitter account. Um, yeah,
Is
it'll
on
be in
my
the.
Arizona. Is it on my Arizona metabolic health website?
I'll take a look. I'll make sure it's everywhere.
Maybe we could do that,
Um,
man. That would be good. Yeah, yeah. I would like to do that because I come across different products like these guys I became happy with Joburg meats, man. There's like, have you tried them yet?
I haven't. I have
I'll
not.
have them send you out some, man. They're super nice people, and I had it on the first time on low carb cruise. I was teasing. I go, you guys are like drug dealers here, man. So I reached out. I actually ordered from them, and they sent me a nice email and they gave me a call. Goes, hey, thanks for ordering. And they're really nice people, and they're really trying to cater to the low carb, the keto. I'm not sponsored by them by the way, but on the newsletter, like if I find products like that I really like, we try to find a discount code to save people money so that they can stay on this healthier lifestyle. Health Code does it for us, and you know Simply Snacking has done it before. I know you have discount codes. So if there's stuff that you have that we could just throw them on the newsletter so that people who want to be healthy can go, these are a good product. These guys are looking at, we're not making a buck off it. We're just trying to, connect people with good products and let them be successful and then, help our patients to be successful. So, everything you're doing behind the scenes with Philip Ovadia and you know, low carb MD, getting us up and running and then getting this podcast up and running. connecting me with these guys and reaching out and getting us sponsored here that by two companies that I love the people. Every time I see them I just love hanging out with them, and they're good people, solid. you know Keto, people don't know this. I'll just tell you this about my, since we've been talking about health code this whole time. uh Keto Mojo, there's something. There's something. They're doing some great work, and I just had the chance to sit down with them and they don't have any kids, and they go, all of our money, like everything is going to a charitable contribution for low carb keto, and they go, we have no one to pass it to, so let's pass it and help people for generations to come. That's the impact, and these are the people I want to be associated with, where they're not just trying to nickel and dime everyone and move ahead and be greedy and self-seeking. And so it's pretty cool that we're all associated with that, and we kind of see, you and I have been around long enough to see through the BS stuff and who's there just to make a buck and who's there to make an impact.
And since you mentioned that, Keto Mojo, I've written articles about Keto Mojo and my use of their ketone and blood glucose meter. I've done several N=1 experiments with the ketogenic diet, and their product is outstanding. I didn't mention that earlier, but I've done several. In fact, when I was training for the LA Marathon, in the month or so leading up to it, I was convinced by Dr. Annette Bosworth to experiment with the ketogenic diet, as in eating less than 30 grams of carbs per day. And I was really worried that it was going to kind of cut into my training going so low carb, and it didn't. I had some of my best runs on fueling on 80 hours of nothing but sardines. So, and I used Keto Mojo to track the ketones the whole way.
Yeah. By the way, when you did the health code, that's an ongoing experiment now, did you get some labs done during that, or did you check ketones and sugars and all that kind of stuff and see how everything tracked?
I did not track my blood glucose or my ketones because I wasn't really concerned about it.
Yeah, you weren't looking at that. You were seeing how you felt and
I just
the hypothesis was it would help your athletic ability. It sounds like it did.
I just got a very outstanding set of labs from Precision Health. I think it was the end of July. So that was really about at the conclusion of the 3 months of my experiment, and the labs were excellent. My my numbers, my HDL and my triglycerides, the ratio is ridiculously good. Um,
As expected, right? With doing what you're
my
doing. Yeah.
my diabetes risk is like almost off the chart, down near like 1% or 2%. And my heart risk, even with that their results are rather conventional. And my heart risk is still, they're not on the low carb bandwagon quite as much as the
Oh, sure.
community
Yeah,
the
yeah. Because
community
we'll
that
raise
I
the
live in.
LDL, right?
But nonetheless, with my LDL and my cholesterol, and all the factors combined, have me down in the low risk for
Triglyceride HDL ratios, all those things
oh,
are great. Yeah,
it's all
it's
good. So
unbelievable.
so
Yeah,
and
raise your
then
HDL, people. If you don't raise your HDL, that's your biggest risk factor right there. And if your triglycerides are through the roof, like that is not good. And so, Chris, man, thanks. I knew it would be this hour would go by so fast. It's always awesome talking to you. So much information. You've experimented, self-experimented, and I think people listening, self-experiment. If it's not working, change it. Don't say, "Well, Sean Baker does this, so I have to do this." Right? Brian said this, or Tro said that. Just say what works for you and go, hey guys, this is working for me. Great. If it's not, change tack, change course. Kind of like what I was talking about at the conference. Is don't do the same thing if it's not working. We all have to pull different levels or levers. And so, Chris, I got to ask you, man, since you know this spiel here, like it's life's best medicine. What's life's best medicine for you? Like, where do you go? And it could be a different answer than you gave me last time we talked, but where's life's best medicine for you right now? What keeps you motivated? What keeps you going? What keeps you when people criticize you online or whatever? Where do you get your strength from?
and I just believe, number one, um, surround yourself with the people that are doing the things that you want to be doing. People that have the values that you want to mostly be surrounded by people that you look up to, people that know how to do things better than you. Don't surround yourself with the kind of people you aspire to be like. And if you can be around people that provide you with support, obviously it behooves you to provide support to them back. We're all in this together. But I also believe in having a positive, hopeful, optimistic mind, because I think when you look at things that way, you find a lot of the things that you're looking for. If you have a cynical, negative mind, um, and you're not open to new possibilities and a new path, you're less likely to find what you're looking for. So um, I'm very fortunate. I'm grateful. I don't take a day for granted, and I feel very fortunate to be here. And I look forward to making the most of every day that I have left, and hopefully that's a long time.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for joining me. Such great stuff. And a lot of people talk about vitamin G, right? Vitamin G and gratitude, right? And gratitude, people gratitude live longer, they do better, counting your blessings, enjoying going out for a run with your wife or your daughter, and enjoying those moments. Because I mean, you went through so much, and going through that stuff, you realize, like, I don't want to argue with this guy on Twitter about something that he's never gonna he's never gonna understand what I'm saying, right? And so I think, and I think the other thing that's really important about this discussion is that you're reaching out to people across the aisle who may have a different nutritional view than you, but you go, hey, you're a great runner, teach me how to run, or you know how to do this, you're a great writer, teach me how to write. And then these guys learn from you. They go, oh, he's not such a bad guy. Well, maybe what he's doing maybe makes sense. Maybe he is a smart guy. And they look at what you're doing and they see the success you have. And so I think some of these guys may, over time, and it's funny, as a matter of fact, while we were having this conversation, several people last year at the low carb meeting, there was a lot of people saying cut the fat to zero, go high protein. And a lot of those guys have reversed themselves in the last year, and they came back and they go, oh, maybe Rob Sivas being one of them. I'm hoping to get him on the podcast to have a long discussion about it, because they're seeing something that they don't like, that they're not seeing. They're looking for outcomes, and we're all looking for outcomes. So doing what you did with Health Code, add that in rather than just whey protein, see how you feel, all these things. And that's what's great, because you may say, I like protein better, right? Or you may have, so it's great to throw it out there and go, these are my results. Maybe everyone doesn't like them, but this is what they are. So I love it. So everyone listening, there's tons of wisdom here. You're going to learn a lot. Like, if you're not following Chris, follow him, get on Twitter, and, what's your
Biggest
handle on Twitter?
biggest comeback.
Yeah, awesome. Biggest comeback. That's what caught my attention too. The biggest comeback. We love a comeback, because you can't come back unless you've had some struggles, right? So, like, it can't just be that sunshine all the time. Yeah, we have to go through those life struggles, and those things make us stronger and better. So everyone listening, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. And, just thank you for your continued support, and for allowing me to bring on great guests like this. So Chris, have a great one, man. Have a great weekend. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify, or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.